It was, at first glance, a steam engine paradise, a place where they could always be safe and wanted and always, always useful. 57646 knew this, knew how lucky he was to be there, but it didn't feel that way to him. He also knew that he would, in a single beat of his iron heart, give all of that up if it meant being with his brother again. 57647, his twin, meant more to him than being safe or wanted or even useful ever could. If the pain of losing his beloved brother was not so acute, he might have noticed the, at first minuscule, fractures in the seemingly perfect utopian world of the island. He might have noticed that, although they gave him a new number and even a proper name, for he hadn't had one before, that they had not repainted him fully, and then he might have wondered why. But he did not, for he was too heartbroken, ridden with guilt and haunted by those he'd left behind to notice anything other than his own pain. For this reason, it was not until years later, the once barely noticeable fissures now splitting apart like stress fractures on the fuselage of an aircraft, that he did notice. By then it was too late. The island was breaking apart, tearing at its seams, and falling like rocks off Turtle Mountain. Engines, mostly steamers, were being sold off and scrapped, left, right, and center, in a desperate attempt to stay afloat, and it was clear, now, that the island was falling from grace. And Donald, because that was the name they had given him, was mad, furious in fact. The island railway, greedy, had taken him away, without his permission, leaving his twin sentenced to scrap only to draw the torch on him too. They had put him through hell for nothing, and he hated them for it. Meanwhile, many miles away in Scotland, 57647 had become very familiar with the leaky, run-down shed he'd been left in. He was lonely and miserable, his only comfort knowing that his brother was safe and wanted. That, however, was about to change. He'd been there for many months, sleeping most of the time away as engines left stationary for long periods tend to do. He'd been in the middle of a rather unpleasant dream about an island railway crumbling into the sea, and his brother stranded, calling desperately for help, when he was startled awake by the doors swinging open with a metallic groan. Two men stood silhouetted in the doorway as he blinked in the sudden brightness. 647, are you still alive in there? It was the manager of the scrapyard. Aye, sir, he replied, voice scratchy from disuse. 'Tis time, is it? The man chuckled. 'Tis your lucky day, Seven. Someone wants to buy ye. His eyes widened. Really? Aye. The second man spoke up. He was tall, with curly red hair and blue eyes, and he liked what he saw. The engine was stark black, with 6 good-sized wheels, a funnel that curved out elegantly at the top, and an open cab. It wasn't too big or too small, and was still in relatively good condition. It was perfect for his quiet little railway. You are just what I need, old boy. What do you think of living by the sea? There'll be goods and even some passengers for you to take. He thought he was dreaming. Aye, I couldn't say no, sir. When do we leave? The man chuckled. You're eager, that's good. I just have to get the papers in order, and then I'll take you there myself. How's that sound? 57647 smiled. Aye, sir, I'll wait here for you. The two men left then, and a few minutes later a pair of workmen came in to do a safety check and light his fire. He sighed as the warmth spread through his boiler, and by the time his new owner returned, he was dozing peacefully. They set off soon after, and he whistled joyfully as he eased out onto the line. If only his brother were here, he thought as he picked up speed. The journey to the coast took them up the West Highland line to Oban Bay, where he was loaded onto a ferry that, according to his new owner, was bound for some obscure Hebridean island. "Sir?" he asked, for the man had joined him on deck some time into the trip. "Are there any other engines on your island?" "Ah," the man, sitting on his running board, replied. "I thought you might ask about that. There is a narrow-gauge steam engine who services a mine and a short line that meets with yours. He was destined for the island of Sodor, but the order was cancelled, so we took him instead. You'll see him often. He's called Duncan." He smiled. "I haven't spoken to another engine in a very long time." "Is it just the two of us, then?" The man nodded. "Aye, 'tis a wee railway on a wee island, ye ken. Nae need for very many of ye, of course." They fell into a comfortable silence then, enjoying the fresh, salty breeze and the clear sky. Eventually, the man spoke again. "There is one other thing." 57647 looked over cautiously. "Aye?" he questioned carefully. "Do you have a name, old boy?" He was surprised. No human had ever asked such a thing of him before. "Nay, sir, only my number, 57647. The man frowned, clearly dissatisfied. "That will na do. Do you have any ideas of what you'd like to be called?" He thought a moment. "Nay. It never occurred to me to consider it before, and then when they were going to scrap me, I figured there wasn't a point anyway." "May I give a suggestion, then?" the man asked, and he agreed. "What do you think of Douglas?" The engine paused, rolling the name around in his mind. Douglas. He liked it. It felt right. Meant to be. Aye, I like that." The man smiled. "Good." As it was, Douglas was in for another shock. When they arrived on the island, he was unloaded by a small, rickety-looking crane that groaned as it lifted him. Its arms strained, and he watched nervously as he swayed in the air. But when he was finally set down on the rails, who should be awaiting him but his old crew? "Driver? Fireman?" he gasped. "What are you doing here?" The two men chuckled as they came over to him. "Long time no see, buddy." His new manager came over as well. I needed someone to run you, so I tracked them down before I went to see you. You should have seen their faces, old boy." Douglas barely heard him. Thank you so much," he said, eyes watering. "You've saved my life and found my crew. I couldn't ask for more." There was only one thing missing now. His crew climbed aboard and they set off down the line. Douglas watched the world go by. The island was windswept and rocky, dotted with greenery and cattle, with a single railway line cutting across it. Arriving at the top station, he found a double-berth shed and a turntable. The standard gauge line ended and a narrow gauge one began, winding off into a shroud of trees. A hoarse whistle sounded. Then a little yellow well tank came trundling into view on the smaller line with a train of trucks. "That must be Duncan," thought Douglas. He whistled a greeting. The smaller engine looked up. "Who's disturbing my peace?" he snapped. Douglas was taken aback. "My name is Douglas. I take it you're Duncan?" "Och, aye," said Duncan. "You're the new engine. Keep your mouth shut and do as you're told and we'll get along just fine." With that said, he shunted his trucks away and disappeared back up the line. "Well," Douglas wheezed. "How rude!" "Never mind," said his driver, as he backed into the shed. "I'm sure he'll no be so bad once you get to ken him." Once he was parked, his new crew set about cleaning and polishing him, and some workmen came to repair his neglected parts. Douglas sat contentedly as this went on, and then he slept well in his new, blessedly dry shed. The next morning, his crew came early to light his fire and get him ready for the day. Soon, they set off. Their first order of business was a passenger service that ran to the other end of the island and back again. When he returned from that, it was to find Duncan sitting on the other side of the platform that separated their lines, looking cross. "You're late," he snapped, and jostled his pair of coaches. "I've been waiting for ages for my passengers, and there's slate that needs to be taken," he said, eyeing a line of trucks nearby. "At least the lorries came on time. Can't believe I've got to wait for you now." Douglas hissed steam and viewed the station clock. "I am not. You're early." The two bickered as the passengers switched trains, and then Duncan set off with a huff of steam. Douglas watched him go, unable to tell if he was stuck up or just plain grouchy. Many years went by then, and although they bickered at first, Douglas and Duncan became good friends. Each day, they would meet at the top station, and Douglas would collect Duncan's goods from the mines and take them down to the harbor, where they were shipped off the island. At some point, Douglas took on an old livery from the Caledonian Railway, royal blue with black and white lining and shiny brass window frames. Douglas quite liked it. "Ah, why do you get new paint but I dinna?" Duncan complained one day at the top station. Douglas rolled his eyes. "Maybe if you weren't so rude, you'd get some too." Duncan wheezed steam crossly. "I'm no rude." "Ah, y'are. On my old railway, your kind of nonsense wouldn't have been tolerated. We got our tenders bashed for it," Douglas explained. British rails had been a dark place, especially for the Scottish engines, who had been forbidden to speak the old tongue they were built knowing, and it had only gotten worse after the diesels came. "Aye," Duncan replied. It was almost a sneer. "Aye, speaking of old railways, can I ask you something, Duncan?" Duncan eyed him. "If it's about tender bashings, then no," he said quietly. "It's not," Douglas assured. "I was wondering. The manager said you were supposed to go to Sodor, but the order was cancelled. Do you ken why?" Duncan shifted a bit. "Something about the money suddenly no being there, I think. Maybe there was a wreck or something and they had to do heavy repairs. I dinna ken. Why?" Douglas frowned. "My brother is there, you see. I heard someone say that they were struggling, that things were starting to fall apart, and I was worried." Duncan frowned too. If Sodor fails, us steamers willna have a safe place to go." "We're safe here," Douglas pointed out. "I'm only worried about my brother. I miss him," he added, downcast. Duncan watched a workman walk across the small yard. "For now, if this railway fails, Sodor would be our last chance, Douglas. We're a dying race." "Och, I ken that fine," he agreed. Douglas was happy there, running up and down the line, day in and out. It was peaceful, quiet until summer when the tourists came. He came to like taking the enthusiast trains, and the humans loved to see him and take his picture. Although he missed his brother, he reminded himself they were both safe and wanted. Sometimes, though, that wasn't quite enough, and he would sit grief-stricken in his shed or cry out in his fitful sleep. If he wasn't careful, his whistle would sound mournful, and he would slow to a sluggish crawl along the line, mind on his twin. This was not helped by the rumours brought along by the tourists. He was sitting at the station one afternoon, eyes trained on the ballast below him, and thinking fearfully that his brother was no longer safe, when the manager walked up. "Douglas," he said, "what's the matter, old boy? I thought you were happy here." Douglas sighed. He trusted the man. "I assume you've heard the rumours, sir, about Sodor? That engines aren't as safe there anymore?" The man frowned. "Aye, but it's no our concern, Douglas. You shouldn't worry yourself about it." Douglas looked up, sad. "Due respect, sir, but 'tis my concern. My twin brother's there, you see. He was sent there when I was shut up in the shed in '59. The man's eyes widened. "Your twin brother? You mean to say they separated you? You must miss him terribly." "Aye, sir. I've always comforted myself by reminding myself that he was safe there. But now, folks are saying they're scrapping and selling engines and cannibalizing them to save others, and Tears ran down his cheeks. "Sodor is supposed to be this great place, and I always thought I could depend on him being safe there, but now—" The manager sighed. "I ken I'd probably be wasting my breath telling you no to worry, Dougie, but if it makes you feel any better, I dinna ken if the rumours are true or no. They could be completely false, something some tosser made up with no real thought of the matter." "Maybe," said Douglas, but he didn't look convinced. The man patted his buffer in comfort. "I'll tell you what. I'll look into it and see what I can find out." "Thank you, sir," Douglas replied. He paused. "Sir, please dinna ask after my brother directly. I couldn't bear it if... I didn't want to ken that. I only want to ken if the rumours are true. I'll draw my own conclusions about sex." The manager nodded. "Very well, my engine. I understand that."